All right, welcome to Beginning Scrapbooking. I am Megan Jax, and I live out here in Washington State, just north of Seattle. Joining me today is Tessa Chappell. She lives out in Indianapolis. She's going to kind of come into the second half. The first part of this session, we're going to be following the what is called the beginner project recipe for Q3 from Creative Memories. It features the summer denim collection on the handout itself. Hopefully you do have that handout. It was sent out via email. If you do not have it, we will make sure that you get it. If you're watching this recording later, we're going to have a link in the description on YouTube that'll help you get that download so that you can follow along. It's a very simple, basic scrapbook layout. It's a great place to start. I'm going to show you how to basically do the initial layout itself, mostly following along their directions. I do have one little change I'm going to make, and then Tessa's going to teach you how to take it up another level with the tools that Creative Memories has available, and to show you how flexible these layouts really can be. We have a tendency to be very visual. We see what's on the page and we want to copy that. What she's going to maybe show you, and I don't even know what it's going to be. She'll have a wonderful layout for you guys to see, but she'll talk a little bit about how you take those general things and you can manipulate them a little bit more to make it work with your layout, or that same cut guide and how you'll be able to just change it up so that you can make all those things. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully you have your handout printed if you have a pen or a pencil available for some notes. I'm going to switch over here to my overhead camera, and we will show you guys, I'll walk through the tools that we'll be using for this layout. Okay, so here's my directions. It was supposed to be printed two-sided, but it's only printed one-sided, and I'm not sure where the other side went, but I've got the important part here, which is the cut guide, right? It has a cut guide with the directions. The other page has the big sketch, which is a sketch of the black and white version, very basic. Then it has the color version that shows you using the summer denim paper. They have a suggestion for the paper. They recommend using two background pieces, which are what we would call tonal. Tonal being not high contrast. I am actually using cardstock. That's about as tonal as you get. There's no pattern to this. It is just a basic color. This print here that I got is actually would be considered more of a tonal print. It's a navy with some white polka dots on it. The other side is a little bit, it's a lighter navy, almost a little bit more to the gray side of things. It also is a tonal as compared to, I'm going to grab a scrap of paper that I have here from another project I did. This is from the Fall Y'all collection. It is not a tonal piece of paper. This is more what we call a statement print. If you look in your picture here, the pattern that they use, and it has all of that floral print on it, that would be called a statement print. It just has a lot more detail to it. It makes a statement, whereas a tonal piece of paper is going to be a little bit more fades into the background. It's going to let those other parts of your layout shine. So whether you have a statement print, you're wanting to show off a really pretty paper, or you just have some photos that you're wanting to show off, that's kind of how that all can work there. So hold on just a second. I am just double checking. I think I just have a quick question. Am I coming through okay, Tessa?
Yes.
Okay. All right, perfect. Okay. So the one thing to note when you're using papers, you do not have to use a statement print ever in your layouts. You can use them. But you don't, there's no hard, fast rule saying you've got to have one statement print, two tonal prints, and some cardstock. You can make it work however you want. That's really where it starts to get subjective in what you like. This layout does feature that statement print pretty predominantly, those pretty flowers. It works really well with the photos that they have. They have some nice, big, chunky embellishments in there that do stand out against that background. For my layout here that I'm going to be showing you today, I am letting my photo dictate the papers that I'm selecting. I have photos from a Mariners game. I live in the Seattle area. We went to a Mariners game last fall, and I have some photos. Um, the baseball collection that we have, I really didn't feel went with the game. It doesn't have the Mariners colors. It just wasn't quite the right vibe. So I'm picking papers that are in the colors of the Mariners uniform, which is kind of that a Mariner dark bluish greens. This is dark sea green cardstock. I've got some navy, and then this back side of this navy print kind of has that bluish gray, which is also kind of in their uniform as an accent color. So I've got the Mariners colors, and that's really what I'm working for here. For me, with that's my default is I either pick out colors of the photos, or if we're doing something like a sporting event, I'm either going to pick school colors, team colors, or usually that's the one of the two. Either school colors or team colors is usually what I will default for on sporting events. Okay, so you can see here I've got two background papers. Mine are just cardstock pieces. I'm going to set those to the side. I've got my personal trimmer, or excuse me, not my personal trimmer. This is a 12-inch rotary trimmer. This is a really handy dandy tool. There's a lot of features on this. We will make sure that you get, I think you already did, the video went out already, part of it, right? Isn't there a video we include if they want to know more about the
trimmer and the border maker are both in the original email.
Awesome. Okay, so if you want to know more about this particular trimmer, definitely check out the email that we sent that had the Zoom information and the handout. There is a video on there where I go over all of the features of this trimmer. It's fantastic. It's definitely a tool you'll want to have. I've got my 13 by 13 cutting mat. I find this very useful. It's upside down. The great feature about this particular cutting mat is I will be able to put my layout on here, and I'll be able to see my measurements all the way around. So that's definitely a great tool to have. Got my photos. I will be using a personal trimmer, which I will be using to cut the paper, or excuse me, my photos. I use the personal trimmer to cut my photos. I do not use the rotary trimmer. I feel that the personal trimmer does a better job with my photos. Tessa uses, I think, one of our older tools to trim her photos, but I use the personal trimmer. And I've got my photos over here. I've got the overall design they want us to have is 3 horizontal, 3 vertical images. You have flexibility when putting your photos on the pages. You can totally deviate from their suggestion. We always create just the basic background. You can see here, this is your basic layout, what it looks like without photos. Then you come down here and you can see it with the photos. Of course, on here, you can add your photos any way you want. I will be showing them mostly in that same orientation. Back to the paper, I already kind of talked about it. I've got that single sheet of paper that we will be cutting. So the feature, this navy dotted design, it will be my where you see more of the statement print. That's going to be my color here. This backside grayish is going to be where you see their darker those darker blue bands. So I'm going to start with the cutting guide. The cutting guide here is it just shows our paper, and it shows the measurements that we're going to do. In general, I like to start with the smaller pieces first. I'm not going to cut off a 6-inch piece here. I'm going to actually cut my 1.5-inch slices first, always leaving myself with as big of a chunk of paper as I can. It just makes it easier to hold in the trimmer. The one thing I do want you to know here, if you have the one thing, choosing your paper for this particular layout, one thing to note is this piece A, is going to go on your layout vertically. All right. So if that means that this needs to be, if you have a pattern paper, this needs to be the top of your paper, right? If you've got trees, you want to make sure your treetops are standing up. These strips, however, they're going to rotate and they'll be on your layout horizontally. So I'm going to I can put an H here telling myself, or maybe I'll turn my, my H sideways and remind myself that these go on my layout horizontally. My paper has a little bit of a pattern, a design to it. I am mostly concerned about this pattern. I want to make sure that when I trim this, I want to make sure I am trimming so that I will have horizontal stripes like this. So when I rotate my paper, those stripes will actually become vertical. This we talk about direction of a directional patterned paper. Something that has trees in it, something that has any kind of writing in it. You want to make sure that when you put it on your page, that it is showing so your trees are to the top side. That pumpkin paper that I had here, this is a directional print. If I were to cut this, if I were to trim this on this way, my pumpkins would go on my paper sideways. So that obviously would be an issue. I don't know that I would recommend using this kind of a paper for this layout unless you were going to very specifically make sure that you cut it so that your pumpkins would go horizontal with pieces D and E. So for me, like I said, I just need to make sure that my stripes are horizontal. So when I cut this, I need to make sure my stripes are going side to side. Pay attention to your patterns of your paper. If this is your first layout, you might want to use a non-directional print. Like I said, when you rotate it, there's no specific direction to that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and cut. I'm going to cut my paper, remove my personal trimmer out of the way. I'll come back to cutting my photos in just a minute. Sometimes I find it, if I do have a direction to my pattern, I am going to make sure that that is the side that is up so that I can double check my pattern direction. The first thing I'm going to do is I need to cut 4 1.5-inch pieces. This trimmer, you can see off here on the right-hand side where my cutting line is. My cutting line is the right side or the left side dash. There's 2 dashes on the gray cutting mat. The left side dash is where my actual cut line will be. To the right of this, I have measurements, and I can actually come out here to 1.5 inches. I find it much easier to line up my paper out here, holding that bulk of the paper with my left hand. I am right-handed, and trimming rather than coming over here, lining it up at 1.5 inch on the left side, cutting and then cutting. I just find it easier to be able to hold the larger bulk of the paper on the right side. So anything under 1 3/4 inch, that's the farthest measurement out here on the right. I will always default to the right side measurements. So I'm going to come over here to 1.5 inch and I'll go ahead and trim. I'm going to do that twice. I need to do it a total of four times. Well, technically I need to make 4 cuts. I need 4 strips at 1.5 inches. So there's my 4 strips. 2 of them will be used, the blue dots. 2 of them will say that the gray stripe. Now I should have a piece here that is roughly 6 inches wide. I can bring out my trimming arm and see that it's at 6 inches. That's where the cutting guide wants us to stop. And I'm going to stop there for a moment. And I'm going to do kind of what we call a dry fit of things. And we'll show you how the layout is starting to take shape. So grab my 2 background pieces. I actually have 2 cutting mats. I'll put these on my table. The large 6-inch piece is going to come here on the left page. It gets mounted flush with the left side of our layout. I'm going to use that the navy on the outside edge. And then I'll put my gray stripe here in the middle like this. And this is where I can start coming in with my photos. I have not cropped my photos, so they're going to actually fill up a lot of the space. So here you can see how things are going together. Now, one of the things I wanted to note here, and if you have the original handout, right here, I feel like my layout is imbalanced. And the reason is because this accent paper is not on this side over here. It's not on the left page. Now, Creative Memories, when they put this together, the reason they were able to do that is see this dark color that is that dark band, which is the opposite side of that pretty floral paper. They carried that dark color over here in the embellishment. It has that dark blue in there. So they're balanced that dark color out by carrying it over as part of the embellishment. I do not have an embellishment that is going to carry that light gray over. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 6-inch piece of paper and I'm going to trim a 1.5-inch section off. This is where my layout is making me go off script a little bit. And that's what I am doing here. So if you're looking at your layout and it felt a little imbalanced, the quick thing to do is just cut that 1.5-inch strip, flip it over, and then we're good to go. My papers are balanced. I've got that light gray over here. I've got the light gray over here. It feels a little more balanced. My photos, in terms of trimming them down, the layout wants us to use, I think they want us, they want us just to cut as a 1/2 inch off, Tessa. I don't have that front piece.
For which one?
The photos.
They're 3.5 by 5.5.
Yeah, so they want us to trim a 1/2 inch off all the way around, or a 1/2 inch off overall, which is about 1/4 inch all the way around. And that's going to allow a 1/4 inch mat to show on all of these photos. So using the personal trimmer, you can look at your photo. I've got probably a little bit more room over on this side to trim it off. Unfortunately, our personal trimmer does not have a measurement out to the side. There are various techniques on how to do it. I eyeball it. I basically come in here and see I've trimmed off about 1/4 inch. To come over to this side. I am probably the worst person to be showing you how to crop your photos. But I do love the personal trimmer because I am able to basically shimmy off just the amount that I need. This needs to come in. They want us, to cut that full. I don't know if I can trim off, come all the way down to 3.5 on these. These ones are a little bit easier. These big ones at the ballpark, just showing. I'm only going to cut this page, these photos on this side to show you guys, and then I will trim the other ones while Tessa's doing her demo. You probably do not need to come down the full 1/2 inch. You could probably go to 1/4 inch all the way around. And that would work too. It depends on how much of the background you want to show. And it may depend on how much you can trim your photos down. All right, so there we go. That's how my photos are going to look on the left page. The right page, I will trim these photos similarly. I may have to make some adjustments because I really don't think off that selfie that I can trim off that full 1/2 inch. In terms of adhesives, there's two main types of adhesives that Tessa and I use. Repositionable, which is these little dots. They're fantastic. They work great. They only stick where there is material to stick them to. So they work great for the fine little borders. It's a green refill. The regular tape runner, which is our permanent adhesive, comes in a clear refill. Comes with you can buy it with a blue case, but it's a clear refill. There's the plastic is clear. This works great when you know for sure where you want your stuff to go. Repositionable works for the delicate items. It can also work if you aren't sure and you want to be able to have a little bit of wiggle room on where you move your items around. I'm pretty certain I know where everything's going to go and I'm happy to have it there. So I'm going to go ahead and use the regular adhesive. I just hold my hand. There is a little spinning wheel up here on top. I like to keep my hand, my finger resting on that, and I use it like a brake. So when I'm in here, there we go. Okay. You don't need a lot of adhesive. A light touch on the a light touch, little bits like that. So you can see I only put, that was way too much. I didn't need to put that much. You can see over here on the other side, see that's a little bit more closer to that, a 1/4 inch or so of adhesive per spot that you put it. Next up, I'll put the adhesive on this little strip. I will butt it up right next to it, sliding it right next to it. And this is where it's nice for to have my cutting mat here, because it's going to help me center my photos. How that's going to work is I'm going to center this photo right here. I'm going to center it on that 6 inch. Here's my 6 inch line. I can come over here, and as long as I want to make sure I'm at 4 1/4 from the top, the 0 is up here at the top, I come down here to 4 1/4. That is balanced out. I am 4 1/4 inches from the bottom, and then I would just slide it over so I've got even borders on both sides. Generally, you only need to put adhesive in the 4 corners of your layout of your photos. When doing the bigger strips, I will put a little more adhesive on there. Sometimes I put a little dab in the middle. It's almost like a 5, the dice, 4 corners and the middle. And then I will go ahead and put the other photos on. I do not have many embellishments for this, really any embellishments for this layout. I need to look and see. I might have a screenshot of our ticket stubs. They were digital tickets. So I might have a thing of that where I could print that off and put it on here. The other option I have is I could come in with, I have some additional photos that I could come in and just go ahead. Like here's my husband and 2 kids there. I could come in, trim this photo down to 4 inches or so, a square, 4 by 4 square. And stack it on top. So where they show embellishments in the layout, sometimes I will just add more photos. The other option I am going to do, I'm going to add, is I did make some decorative borders. I use the border maker system. Again, it is something in the email that Tessa and I sent you. There are some details on how that system works. I pre-made the borders because I didn't necessarily want to take the time to show you how to make these borders. They're very simple. And you can see there, that's how the layout's going to work. I will probably come in with some alphabet details or something to show that it was the Mariners game, the date of the game, and the score of the game. I do have some room for journaling. This lighter gray paper will allow me to journal on here if I wanted to get some more details about the game itself. So that's pretty much my layout. I am going to work on this a little bit more as Tessa's showing you hers, mostly adhering the pieces and cutting down these photos to size so that they fit on this layout. All right. So hopefully if you guys had any questions, you can put them in chat and we will be happy to answer them. All right, Tessa, are you all set?
I'm ready. Hello, everybody. So I am going to also be working on the same layout, and I'll flip down my table so we can see. Actually, I don't think I can. I don't think I'm admin.
Okay, let me.
My table.
I probably made the wrong one of you admin.
Okay, so I have been working on a vacation album from last year. So I went through to find some photos to work on for Emerson's album. One challenge with this layout is that you're really looking for 3 horizontal, 3 vertical. And of course, you always have the option of rotating it, but I wanted to really try to stay true to the orientations in the photos. And I did go ahead and cut mine, but I do want to point a couple of things out before we cut that the cut measurements really are suggestions. So they have suggested that you cut your photos to 3.5 by 5.5. There are times when you really may not be able to get down from your 4 by 6. And if so, we can make that 6-inch piece a little bit narrow. We can cut that and leave more space here for the 4 by 6. So I already cut my photos down, and one of them here in the middle, this one I was not really able, like Megan had a challenge with getting hers down 1/2 inch. Sometimes you don't have that 1/2 inch to give, and so I trimmed mine. I left the 4 inches and I just trimmed, I think these two actually are still the 3.5, and you can see I still have plenty of space. The goal of cutting down the photo is that you have a little bit of border with that base paper that gives you the matted effect. So don't stress out too much. If you really can't crop your photos, you have a couple of options. You can leave one of them bigger than the others and cut the other ones down. You can narrow it down to 2, or you can make this space a little bit wider if you really want to fit in a true 4 by 6 and have 3. You can also have 3 4 by 6 without any matting. Just have them right next to each other. So you have some options there with that. These were photos all from Canyonlands National Park. And so I went through and chose, I was excited to use this paper. In my actual album, I used Wanderlust. And this is a Croptoberfest 2016 pack that has a lot of Southwest colors. So I was excited to actually find, I can use this in their book since it didn't go with what I actually did in the Fast to Fab. So like Megan talked about, when you're choosing your paper, you do want to like both sides. This one works out really nicely because it has a dark, almost a real dark tonal effect on one side. And then I have this stripe on the other side. The options of, as a cutting guide, again, we're really just cutting 4 1.5 inch strips. So what can I do if I want to change that? Well, the most obvious one to me was that I can use some punches. And so I'm going to use boot prints, which is one of our border maker punches. We consider it a knockout style. And what that means is it's going to leave the straight edges on each side. I'm easily going to be able to recreate that strip effect with it, but it's going to give me that design in the middle. We also have border maker cartridges that are the same concept with the knockout. This one is Ancient Key, which would work out nicely. The difference between them, the cartridges tend to be a little bit smaller, so the designs are a little bit smaller. And this one would fit nicely within 1.5 inches. For boot prints, I'm going to be a little bit more than 1.5 inches. And so this is when I will start varying the size cuts of the strips I'm making, because I do want to accommodate this boot prints. I actually have 2 pieces of paper. We'll see how time goes. I actually can just make this twice so we can see the difference of adjusting our cuts for the strips. So I'm going to start, and I have some options for the base paper. We're going to talk about those in a little bit, but I am going to start with punching 2 because I know that the variation now in my adaptation is going to be the width of the punches. And so before I cut the rest of it. I'm going to punch these first. When I know that I want the dark to pop up, I want this side of the punch to show. And so I want to punch with that side of the paper up. However, as we've talked about directional paper, I know that I want my paper pattern to go. I want these to go horizontal. When I cut my 6 inches, I can see that. And so I got to make sure that even when I flip my paper, I'm cutting along this right here, so I maintain the horizontal effect I want. I'm going to punch with that up because that will kind of put, when you punch paper, sometimes you have a little bit of the paper that bends one way or the other, and that will keep that clean. I'm going to pull this through. The border punches have the wings on the side. They allow you to pull the design through. You have to line it up. The boot print is kind of plays with your head a little bit because all the pieces look very similar. And this one in particular makes a huge mess. So now I need to assess how wide this strip will actually trim. 1.5 inches is what the cutting guide says. If I do 1.5 inches on our 12-inch trimmer, we have these little sight lines. I can see I'm real close to the edge of the boot prints. I can almost do it if I had a perfect cut, but I don't want to risk that. I'm just gonna push just a little bit over, maybe 1/16 of an inch. So pretty close to 1.5 to give myself a little bit of grace there. So then I want to do it again. You have to punch and trim each time. I was on a mission this weekend I started the vacation album back at Meggan's in February. I've already been on my 23 vacation, so now I have that whole album. I was like, I've got to get this done. I made pretty good progress. I just have a few things in the book, and it's just the second half. There's actually a whole first half of the trip I need to go back and do. That was the family reunion part of the trip, so it's a whole different theme. Not as much memory per se, and not as much adventure. So I did this one first. Okay, so what do I have left? I'm going to go ahead and cut my 6 inches. And then I'm going to see what's left. I know I'm not going to be at 3 inches because I cut into that a little bit. With some papers, you have a little bit of variation. Some of them are a little bit over 12 inches, some of them a little bit under. I'm about just a 1/16 or so. So I can 1.5, just slightly under 1.5 is going to keep this in half. I can also see here too, I'm centered between these two black lines because I'm pretty close actually still. So I'm just cutting it in half. Whatever's left, you just cut in half. Another option you're cutting your strips would be to use a decorative blade. So those are easy to flip in and out with our 12-inch trimmer. We have a lot of choices. You just exchange one right here and it would give me nice little decorative edges. So that's an easy adaptation also. Okay, I need to choose my base papers. So the base papers really are providing the mat that you saw with Meggan's layout. I picked out 3. Obviously, the pictures have a lot of stone in them. They have a lot of rock. And so I really had to look at how the pictures were going to look against the paper. Tends to be a lot of yellow, oranges. But then I also have to look at how it compared to the paper. And then, of course, I have the back side of it, which is really more of a charcoal color. So in my mind, this was brown. It really is more charcoal. So I eliminated this one. I think it's just a little bit too brown for that one. This one was called Candlelight. I think it's a little bit too yellow, a little bit too bright, a little bit too close to the colors of my rocks. So I narrowed that one out. And that left me with beige, which is a pretty basic color. It can kind of go towards the browns. It can go towards the charcoal, the grays. And so I think it'll provide a nice base for my pictures. Let me get things out of the way and we'll lay out this one. Those of you that follow me on Facebook probably remember when I posted back in February when I went to Meggan's retreat and I was printing the photos, and that was like 2,000 photos from this trip. I mean, it was just absurd. And so I have narrowed that down. I mean, over half. It's easier for me to narrow them down actually after printing. And so I have plenty of extras, and that's why I picked through. These are actually the ones that got rejected that I'll use for the kids' books. I do not do the full vacation for them. They will just get a few pages, kind of snapshots of the trip. Okay, so if I was laying this out as originally intended, I have my strips and I have my punched border, and my photos would go down the middle. And this would be pretty close to how they intended the layout to look. The challenge for me is that I have a lot of photos and I hate to waste too much space, especially in the kids' books, like I said, because I'm not going to give them a whole lot of layouts. I followed the designs, I cut them down. They're not going to fit 4x6 peekaboo. So what can I do? What can I adapt to fit more photos on the page? And so I was looking over here and I was like, well, I could shuffle the strips. And so this is straight down the center. It doesn't give you extra space to get anything very big above or below. So it's like, well, let's rearrange this a little bit and see what my options are. I could, have my photos across the top and all the strips at the bottom beside punched. And then I have a large space down here that I could put more photos. It actually does kind of mimic this open edge here. So that would look fine. I'd have lots of space down here. I could either put side by side 4x6, or I can bring in the peekaboo pockets and add 3 more, or a variety mat for journaling down here. I felt it looked a little heavy though. So that I was like, well, what if I just pull one of them down here? It would give me enough space. I could keep my pattern at the top, push the photos up. And then I could have my strips along the bottom. I even have some space because of the trimming. I can space these out a little bit. On the handout, they had them butted up close together. You could space them out a little bit, see a little bit more at the bottom. I have a nice contrast with the beige and this dark color. You just have to be pretty intentional about your spacing when you adhere them. And that will give me the space down here to have the 4x6 peekaboo spot for the layout. So over here on the 6 inches, they did show embellishments, but like Meggan said, you can also use that space for photos. So I can fit in some more photos here. I already trimmed them down to fit. We do have 4x4 peekaboos now. I'm not sure if they're back in stock. If they're not, but those are great for adding. I kind of wish we'd get a 4x5. It's like, how picky can we be? We finally got 4x6, then we got 4x4, 4x3. 4x5 I actually cut down quite a bit. So that's going to be my next campaign moon. It's going to get 4x5 because sometimes just an inch off is all I need to do. So variations, let's recap what you can do. One, you can adjust the size of your cuts. You could make, if this one had been less than 6 inches, then you would have had less than 6 inches over here, and these strips probably just would have ended up a little bit smaller. If you rotate this, it's going to look kind of similar to where I was going over here. If you have more vertical than horizontal photos, you can use the punches. The knockout styles are really easy to incorporate into here. The other option, if you don't want to punch, or in addition to punching, is you can grab some of our laser borders and or the border stickers and adhere them down the strips, kind of like the old border strips back in the day. You can also take that 3 inches and cut it in a different proportion. So if you have 3 inches, you could do 1 inches and 2 inches and give you varying, if you're not punching, having varied width of strips for there. And then you can rearrange your strips, give yourself more space, top or below, wherever you need it, if you're trying to fit more photos in. And then the third option, which I didn't go over, is a decorative blade. So I think over here, maybe this looks a little plain over here. I could grab a blade. How about the decal? Just something nice and subtle. Because we're working on base pages, we don't have to worry about piecing anything together, that it's fine. If I want to make this a little bit smaller, I can just cut off a little bit, give myself a deckled edge. Going to pop out nicely against that light color. And then if you really do have more space, the other option is you could cut it down here too and center that a little bit more. You could see the light on each side. You could cut it there also. Also, like Meggan said, if I wanted to bring, you know, the balance and the punching over, I could go ahead and punch down the strip of this and then flip it. And then I would have my boot print. So pretty similar to how she made her borders. You could punch one and cut it down. So we have a couple minutes. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to have the dark side up. Make sure I got my boots lined up. If I didn't have such a busy print, I could actually punch it and leave it like that, but I know that when you have busy print, sometimes what you punch doesn't show up very well. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my straight blade. And then give this a trim off of there. This one actually does fit nicely even on what I have left. So now I don't even need to worry about matting that one. This one down here at Mesa Arch, I probably would go ahead and matte so that it stands out, and maybe go with this color right here. Or maybe I'll pull in one of these accent colors to matte that one. I could tighten it down a little bit in the crop, but I don't want to lose too much of the expanse of the canyon that they're looking over. So any questions or other ideas? Hopefully this generates some options for taking a very basic layout, very basic cuts. Yeah, you can add some variety into your layouts. I know that I am so far behind that these are right up my alley for the kind of layouts. I have a little bit in them, but I still have a lot of photos. The goal is really just to get the layout done, but have a little fun in it also. So any questions? I think those are all the points I wanted to cover. I don't have a lot of room for embellishment either, as Meggan said. This collection, this was a paperback that didn't come with anything else, and one of the pieces of paper actually has strips. Some of our paper packs do have strips like this that you can cut apart, and so this is a good layout to pull out if you have those and you're trying to incorporate them. You know, I could substitute out one of these with one of those. And the mats didn't come in a mat pack. They came in 4x6 that you cut apart. So I'm going to choose one of these and put it into this peekaboo pocket down here. It is Craptoberfest 2016, and I have been hoarding this, waiting for the perfect opportunity for Southwest photos. This will probably actually make a debut in my vacation this year in 2023 when we went to Colorado and we did Mesa Verde. A lot of Native American influence down there. So I thought this pack would work in nicely with that vacation, but I had to get last year's vacation done first. So Thank you all for joining us. I don't see any questions in the chat. I recognize most of the names. Were any of you new to us today? Or you might end up catching us on the recording too. I see a lot of seasoned people out there, so you guys actually scrapbooking away. If you do your layouts, we'll have you post them in the scrapbooking ideas and inspiration. We'll put the link in with the email with the recording along with these tips. We'll put this into a blog post and you'll be able to reference it whenever you're looking for an easy layout. So that's that. Since we do have a couple more minutes, I will go ahead and show how to cut out with the Border Maker system. I have 4 kids, and so a lot of times that means I do very similar layouts for each of them. So it's not a big deal for me to just make the same version of layout, maybe a different paper, different punches. For this paper, it has not so much a pattern that matters which way that it goes. And the back of it also is kind of a tonal. I think I do like this version as it. So I'm going to punch down this side, this red up here. So the Border Maker system, the cartridges pop into here. Put your paper in the housing. I'm gonna get myself turned around. Ancient Key is also one of our newer ones from this year. I think it lends itself to some Southwest Aztec influence. This one is not going to punch as wide as a boot print, so I'm going to trim this, and I might even trim a little bit less than 1.5 inches. I'm going to do 1 1/16 inches. So that was a little thin, but it'll work. I probably should have gone 1 1/8. Yeah, 1 1/8, a little bit better on that design, not quite so tight. So then I'm going to cut my 6 inches. And then I'm going to see what's left. So what I have left is probably going to be bigger than 3 inches since I made my border smaller. It looks like I'm about 3 7/8. This is when you get to do the math in your head. So I always have to break down the math. So that's 1 1/2 is going to take me to 3. 175 is going to take me right here. And then 1 to like 3/8. We're kind of closer to 2. I gotta look at this down here. It's always fun to do challenging math on camera. Sometimes I break down the boxes too. So I'm going to 2, 4, 2, 4. A little less than 2 inches. I'm going to use the same beige because I know my photos are going to look the same. And then you decide if you want your pattern above or below your border. Where I cut that kind of thin, maybe I wanted that a little bit deeper on that side with the red. I'll just push it up against the paper. You'll never notice. And that will give me some options too for one of my other kids. So just adjust your cuts based on what punch you're using. Well, thank you all for joining us. I I still can't flip my back to my face, but we will send this out. You can post them to the ideas group. We'd love to see your beginner layouts that you do. Did we hashtag them? Whatever it is. I don't remember. Did we do beginner layout, beginner class?
Something like that. We'll have to figure out what it is and post it, share it in the email. I think we did hashtag them last night, but there's no hashtag on the handout itself.
Yeah,
So we'll have to just remind them of that in the email.
I will put it in the email. I'll look and see what we did last time so we can do it in the email for that. So if you have any questions, comment on the post, and we look forward to seeing what you create. Coming up next is Power Hour, which is the 12th, so 1 week from today at 8 o'clock Eastern. Also layouts you can adapt to the beginners. We just tend to add a little bit more to them. So hopefully you can join us for that. Now that you're subscribed, you will get the emails with the Zoom link for that next week. And here's a hint, it's actually the same one as today. So just keep this email handy, and you can log in for Power Hour next Tuesday. So thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you much.